Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Adult Bible Studies. I'm Wayne Williams, and as always, it's my privilege to be with you today. Today is a very special day. Today is Christmas Day, and I want to say to you a very heartfelt Merry Christmas. I hope this can be a season for you where all the good things come to you, where you are able to hear the Christmas story in a new and fresh way. We are able to have family and friends or do celebrate in other ways where you can really be touched again by the reality of God's love. I know not everyone will be joyful and filled with happiness during this season. There's one thing about the holidays is sometimes they come with a lot of memories and reminders of uh, losses and of things that have happened during the year. And I hope that you can, while you deal with those appropriately, I hope that you can also kind of put them aside a little bit and make room in your heart for God to touch you through this special Christmas story and through the realization that His love is so uh, powerful and so real and so personal. It's directed to me and to you in a very personal way. He calls us by name. He knows each one of us and He cares about us. I hope you're well and doing well during this season. We had a little bit of a disruption at my house today. I'm recording this on Friday before Christmas, and we woke up this morning in sunny, balmy, usually balmy Alabama, and to -7 degree temperatures, and our power was out. We are blessed though because we have a well built house and it didn't lose the heat that it had built up very quickly. Power company is good and they came out and fixed the problem and got us back online by around 12 o'clock. And so it wasn't a big trauma or anything, but it was one of those little shakes that you get every once in a while to remind you that there's a lot of things that we depend on one another for in this world, and our power supply is one of those. But anyway, I hope you're having a good holiday season, irregardless of what you're having to deal with. Maybe be traveling or anything else, someone who can't come and you're missing them very much, whatever. I hope that this can be a time when you can get past those things and really hear God's story afresh and new. We're going to continue today in the Gospel of Matthew. We're using Matthew's account of the birth narrative to study Advent this year. This is our last lesson in that series. Last week we looked at the Magi, the three wise men. I love that saying, wise men still seek Him. And in the spirit of the sea of the season and of the day in which we live, I like to change that a little bit and say wise people still seek Him because God still seeks each one of us, and that's the reality of the Christmas story. The Magi remind us that God's love and grace wasn't just for the specific narrow little group of people called the Jews, but it had an intent and a range to be influential into the rest of the world. And these Persian priests and philosophers were able, because of their sensitivity to the things that were going on in the world and the marks of God's touch upon the world, were able to receive the message that something great was going on and to proceed on. And again, just their presence reminds us of how God's love reaches out to everyone. Today we're picking up right where the Magi, where we left off last week with the Magi. They have arrived, they have seen the Christ child, they presented their gifts. We're not sure how long they stayed around, but they stayed around for a while. And when they left, or just before they left, God again intervened. I love that one of the things about Matthew's story is Matthew's depiction of the birth narrative is that he shows us over and over and over again how God has puts in His influence along this storyline, it's clear that all of this has not just been a random process, but it's been something that God has been planning for a long time. He knew exactly what was going to happen, and He's worked it out to the most minute detail. And so that the Magi, as they were preparing to leave, they realized that they had promised King Herod that they would go back by his place and let him know where the child was and who the child is and parents and that sort of thing. God sent an angel to them. And in that angelic message, they were told not to go back by Herod's and have a conversation with him and share with him information about the Christ child, but to leave by another means. And that's what they did. Faithful men of the Spirit who were directed and guided by God. Faithful people who trusted God in a special way, like the shepherds going back into the field and continuing to do their job, but with that special sense of God's love and grace in their world. Well, today, the Magi have left, and that's where we pick up. Matthew chapter 2, beginning with verse 13. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Another dream. God again asserting his influence, appearing, talking to Joseph. And again, remember, for Matthew, Joseph is one of the key players in this scene, and he gets a lot of attention here in Matthew. He's the one who receives the dreams. He's the one who makes the decision about how to react and respond to these dreams. And some of these dreams call for pretty radical action, and this one in particular does that. He says, the angels appeared to Joseph, and they said, get up, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. What? Escape to Egypt? Yet, when we look back historically to this time in history and to the things that were going on then, we find that Egypt was a place that Israelites often escaped to. It was a place where they could gain asylum, kind of like our border with Mexico, people seeking asylum, seeking safety and a barrier between things that are going on in their land and things trying to get their lives back together again. And so, especially in Alexandria, Egypt, there was a large community of Jewish people, and perhaps that's where Joseph and Mary and the baby Jesus went. And just exactly how long they stayed there, we're not sure, but they stayed until Herod passed away and there was no longer that threat upon Jesus' life. And so we see as we go on in Scripture here, that very thing being brought out. Stay there until I tell you, an angel says, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. A death threat. Herod is going to try his best to kill the child. And we've already seen this in the character of Herod. He was somebody who was very paranoid. And anything that resembled a threat to his kingship and to his being on the throne, he jumped on real quickly. He had killed many people, including his wife, because of the potential that they had for causing a coup or having him dethroned one way or another. And so Herod was really this kind of crazy man, and he's threatening to kill the child. And here we see a little bit of that image of the Jewish people in Egypt, don't we? Moses was in Egypt, and Pharaoh, remember, he became aware of the fact that the Jews were prospering and were growing and multiplying and becoming quite a significant part of his community, and he was concerned about controlling these people, and so he sent his soldiers into the Jewish camps to kill the young boys. And like that, in that situation, Moses was spared by an act of God, and by God giving them the insights to how to do that, and sending Pharaoh's daughter down to the Nile at just the right time to see that basket with the baby in it, and her heart being pricked, and taking Moses in. Similar, we see God's actions. It's when we read the Bible, we look back and we see all these things and we think, wow, wow, wow. But you know what? I think God is probably still doing all those wow things in our world today, and maybe we just are not seeing them. Maybe if we lived 200 years from now, we would look back on our day, the history of our day, and we would go, wow, wow. That sometimes our hearts are not open and receiving that influence of God in a special way. And so one of the things I pray for is, Father, help me to see your hand as it moves across the face of my world, as it touches people in my world, as it changes situations. And yes, Lord, there's a lot of bad things going on, and uh, would that you could just come in and straighten it all out. But I know that's not your way. You want us to respond in love to your love, and you're not going to force that situation. And so evil persists, but good also persists. And we need those eyes of faith to see those things. And this is just a good example of how we can look back on it and see it. But now we might be experiencing some of those very sort of wow moments, but missing them. And I hope we're not doing that. I hope God can speak directly to each of us. And I hope not only that he can speak to you and I, but that we can be bold in sharing that with others to encourage them and lift their faith up as well. Well, I'm chasing a rabbit. I want to get off of that and come back to the story here. It says, he got up and took the child and his mother during the night and left for Egypt, uh, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And we're not sure how long they stayed in Egypt. Herod had a reign of 33 years. And none of the sources that I looked at uh, gave me a sense of what year of Herod's reign we were in when he uh, uh, issued the edict that the young boys were to be killed. But somewhere in that 33-year reign, all this took place. And at the end of that 33-year reign, when Herod died, an angel again appeared to Joseph. Joseph, where he was staying until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled, this is Matthew helping us to remember. He says, and so was fulfilled that what the Lord had said through the prophet, out of Egypt I call my son. Now, you might just read over that, and I must admit, the first time I read over it too. But one of the commentators was real good about bringing out the importance of how that prophecy included calling this child my son. God's authentication, even at this early stage of his life, that Jesus was indeed his son, his called one. We see this happen again at Jesus' baptism. We see this happen again at his transfiguration, where God authenticates his son. Even before his birth, through the prophets, he was saying, out of Egypt will come my son. When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. The Magi gave Herod a window of timeline there where the child was born, and so he had this idea that anything, 2 years was probably older than the child would be, but it was old enough to make sure he didn't miss anyone. And even included in this edict of death a larger area where one of the historians said that this whole physical area that we're talking about, because it was not a densely, heavily populated area, there was probably only about 1,000 people that lived in this area. And so if you think, okay, 1,000 men, women, and children living in this area, that means that probably there were less than 20 children that were killed. Yet that's still 20 innocent lives. The Catholics celebrate a festival of the Innocents on the 28th of December, and where they acknowledge the innocence of those who were taken in this situation. And we recognize the coldness and the cruelness of man in response to God. And here comes Matthew again, wanting again for us to remember prophecy and see how prophecy is being fulfilled and God's plan is becoming revealed as we go through this. He says, then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. And here's the words of Jeremiah. A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more. Now, the historical context for that verse is as the Jewish people were being taken into exile by the Babylonians. But yet, nonetheless, the words of the prophet here are recorded and again referenced back to as a foretelling of what was to come. Let's move on. It says, after Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt. Here's that dream again, God's influence, God's direction, and said, get up, take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel, for those who are trying to take the child's life are dead. So he got up. Here we go. And last week we talked about how Joseph responded to God's affirming to him that Mary was okay and he should take her as his wife. And Joseph responded immediately. Here again we see the faithfulness and faith of Joseph as he responds to this commission to go on. He says, so he got up, took the child and his mother and went to the land of Israel. Moses went back to Egypt after his exile. Christ comes out of Egypt and returns to Israel. See a lot of parallels there where Jesus and his personal history gets highlighted and brought into the context of the Jewish people and how Jesus, just by the things that he goes through, represents the Jewish people in so many ways. Okay, we go on here. He says, but when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. So he decided not to go back to Judea, but he said, having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee. Herod's kingdom, after Herod died, it was broken into eventually 3 provinces, and only one of those provinces was ruled by his son. The province that included Galilee was ruled by another person who was less brutal and less insensitive towards the people and towards their needs, a more kingly king, for instance. It says, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. Here's Joseph again. Here's Matthew again, looking for those threads of Old Testament prophecy and the fulfillment of those prophecies. He went to Nazareth. And see, here again he says, so was fulfilled what was said through the prophets. He will be called a Nazarene. What a powerful story of God and his intention and his love and his grace and his direct involvement in the world in which we live, but an involvement that does not coerce or force, excuse me, or make us do anything outside of being aware of just how much God cares. And then we're left with that opportunity to respond to that. It's easy to respond to someone who's caring and kind and doing things for you, isn't it? It's unfortunate that so many in our world miss that and don't take seriously the opportunity that they have to respond to God and ask God to be a part of their lives and ask God for forgiveness and to bridge that gap that's been created between themselves and God by their sin. We need to say, Father, forgive me. And Father, help me to walk with you. For I can see in reading your word, I can see in the stories of old, I can see in the stories of your Son, Jesus Christ, that you are able and you have a plan. And if I walk with you, it might not always be easy. Everything may not always go just right. But nonetheless, everything will be for the best and will work out because your plan is a plan of love and grace and fulfillment. The story of Christmas. Just so many different beautiful songs that come to our minds during Christmas time. Love came down at Christmas. Now it's up to you and I to go and tell it on the mountain, tell it to others as we see them during this special season. Jesus Christ is born, and in his birth, God shows us just how much he cares about each of us. God bless you. Have a rich and wonderful Christmas season. In Jesus' name I pray.